Wow, I tell you, this has been spectacular. I feel that we have accomplished everything that I'd hoped to accomplish already. This has really set the stage, I believe, perfectly for what I had hoped we would get to for our main course. Philippe, thank you. Really could not have set the table better. Senator, thank you again for setting this up. What I really wanted us to get together tonight to do was, we all love the oceans. We're all engaged in the oceans in different ways. I know many of you, most of you in this room, some are deeply involved as advocates, donors, have expertise that go back decades. Others, we have high school students who are just falling in love with the oceans and getting engaged. I think we all love the oceans, care about the oceans, are looking for our way to engage, or looking for how our organization is going to be more effective going forward. But there's a lot of uncertainty right now. November 8th definitely threw some big question marks up. Therefore, I wanted to get together with the folks in Southern California so we could talk about what this means. Specifically, I would reach out to the champions who we have relationships and ask them what they see so that I could bring that back and share it. So my goal tonight is to hopefully share with you a little bit of information that you might not have had, or if it is information that you had, maybe begins to have you think about it a little bit differently, see some different opportunities going forward, and most importantly, come away from a political discussion with a little bit of optimism. Because I think for all of us, political discussions over the past few months have not ended very optimistically. And Philippe really did set the stage that tonight is about optimism, and as the senator said, it's about solutions. And I can tell you that even though I now get down in the mud of real electoral politics, and that's what I'm here to talk about, I can promise you it's going to be optimistic with real solutions, and I'm not living in fantasy land. So let me get started. Okay, so let's set the stage. November 8th. This is going to be one of those days where our grandchildren ask us where we were when we heard the news, I'm afraid. What happened? We all know. Donald Trump was elected as president. The Republicans controlled the House and the Senate. Mike gave you the good news. 51 ocean champions elected. That's right up there with our high water mark. Let me break that down a little bit more so you guys know what that means. That basically was 2 years worth of work for us coming to fruition. We work on a 2-year cycle. The day after the election, we get to work on the next election coming up. We're structured in a way that allows us to do all the things that we need to do to help them get elected. That basically means money. We write them checks. We run campaigns to help them win. We do whatever it takes. Many of you in this room who support us, you help us make that happen. That's where our money goes. It goes to them so that they can win, so that they're in Congress, so they do the things that matter for our oceans. That's what it's all about. It's really that simple. 51 of them won. 14 first-time ocean champions. 8 first-time members of Congress. 2 in the Senate, 6 in the House. Most of our elections have looked about like that. 6, 8 brand new ocean champions each time. That's going to bear fruit down the road, I promise you. Lots of young people have been coming in each election with us. At some point when the House and the Senate flip, we're going to see a lot of young Democratic champions on there. We're bipartisan. We elected more Republicans than we have in recent elections. That's important. They control the House. They control the Senate. We were therefore working hard to elect more Republicans. We did, on key committees, in key areas. So that's what it looks like. To really understand, if we're going to talk about what does this mean for our oceans, we're going to have to look back. What have we been dealing with prior to November 8th? In the few years leading up to this, we've had an Obama presidency with a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. That's not new for us, okay? Now, in these last couple of years of the Obama presidency, we have gotten a tremendous amount of great actions out of the president. A lot of good, hard work. Many of the people in this room have been part of. Many in the Obama administration have been working for a long time. Those things were coming to fruition. I'll talk a little bit about some of those details because they matter. What might happen with a new administration with those actions. But let me tell you, we were also getting some action in Congress. Again, Republican-controlled Congress. Legislation moved. It was difficult. It was hard. Microbeads legislation. Harmful algal blooms legislation. Pirate fishing, which has already been mentioned. This has been important, modest, one could say, compared to some of the larger pieces of legislation that we've wanted to move and that the champions have wanted to move. But the ocean champions in Congress, in the House and Senate, have worked hard and moved ocean legislation. We know how to do this in a Republican-controlled. They know how to do it. When I use the we, I'm usually referring to we, the ocean community, but really it's them. That name, Ocean Champions, it was named for the champions in Congress. They're the ones that make this happen. They're the ones who get elected, who have the responsibility and the authority to pass the laws. Now, before we pivot back to the administration, this is something that is so critically important. It wasn't an accident that Ocean Champions chose to focus on, as Philippe put it, the 535 men and women in the Congress. That's our focus. We also work on the state and local level, and we'll be doing more of that in the future. That's important, and that can be powerful. We want to do a lot more of it. And we don't work at the presidential level. That's an entirely different discussion. Critically important, but there are reasons why we don't do it. But why do we work on Congress? Because Congress matters. When they do pass a law and the president signs it and it enters into force, it's hard to get rid of it. They're going to find that out with Obamacare, even when it's the number one thing they've spent almost 8 years trying to get rid of. The only way they will likely get rid of it is to actually have a replacement that pretty much takes care of almost everything that was there before. So my point is, Congress matters so much because the laws they pass, that's what is essential. Our theory of change is that to save our oceans, we need federal legislation. And to get that federal legislation, it's hard. But there's no shortcut. We have to elect enough members of Congress to have a pro-ocean Congress to get them passed. No shortcut, no way around it. That's our mission. That's what we do. Now, short of that, President Obama stepped up when he couldn't get those things through, and he took a lot of action on his own. Thank goodness. He did that in multiple ways, and it matters. So let me quickly just touch on a few of them going forward. You might have heard about the monuments that were established, marine protected areas. He expanded in the one in the Pacific, out in the Hawaiian Islands, the largest in the world. He added the first ever in the Atlantic. This is using a law, the Antiquities Act, that the president has the authority to use. These are going to be very hard to be removed, okay? That is something that is a law, legislation that the president has the authority to use. He did some actions under offshore oil drilling that were administrative on one side. That's using your agencies, have them do stuff, regulations and law, rules making and that type of thing. Very important. It's how we get things done. But it doesn't have the force of law. And he used a very small little part of a law that a lot of people weren't familiar with. And that'll work its way through the courts, and we'll find out about that one. And then he did a lot of things through what's called the Executive Act. Would use an executive order. And those things are signed with the stroke of a pen, and they are removed with the stroke of a pen. So what will this mean if we're looking at a Trump administration, just thinking about what happened in terms of on the Trump level? I'm not going to speculate on what Donald Trump might do. I don't think Donald Trump knows what he's going to do. And until I see the tweet, I don't think any of us know what he's going to do. And I haven't seen any tweets about the ocean yet. But what we can speculate is looking at the structure of these things, okay? The monuments, the one in the Pacific, talking to people on Capitol Hill and friends in Washington, they feel it's safe. The one in the Atlantic, because there's not as strong congressional support, even though this was taken as a presidential action under Antiquities, because there may not be as unanimous congressional support, that one might be vulnerable. So there may be some work needed there. Oil, offshore drilling, this is going to be a battle. The rulemaking part can be overturned and changed with a new administration, and we'll see how the law holds up. And then when it comes to executive actions, again, they can be changed with the stroke of a pen, but because they don't have the force of law, are they really going to look at these things? Is it really necessary to take them down? If the most important action that President Obama took in this regard was the National Ocean Policy. It was one of the very first actions that he took. We had worked on this in Congress for years, couldn't get it moved. So we worked with the Obama transition team and had it all lined up when he came in as president. And he moved very quickly on it. All this did was organize 26 agencies to talk with each other. And it does more, but the bottom line is it doesn't have the force of law. It used existing legislation. So why would the Trump team or the Trump administration they may not want to deal with this. If the agencies want to talk to each other and coordinate, that may not happen. The laws that Congress passed, harmful algal blooms, microbeads, the treaties that then have implementing language, pirate fishing, they're not going anywhere. That pirate fishing, by the way, I had the pleasure of being at our ocean conference that Secretary Kerry put together last September. Several of you in the room were there as well. That treaty has entered into force. So this basically has not just been a treaty that the United States signed that had no teeth. This treaty is in force internationally with teeth, making a difference already in ports around the world, and is going to have a huge impact on shutting down pirate fishing. These things work. And the United States was a big part of that. The United States was essential, as always, our leadership on it's not going away for all their talk of renegotiating international treaties. Okay, so I think the important thing I want to emphasize here is even though we don't know what it might look like, there's no reason for us to assume the worst of what might happen, but we have to be prepared and anticipate knowing what the structures are. I know that the groups who do offshore drilling are already up and prepared and are getting ready for that battle and will be ready for it, as are the folks who were involved in the monument, as are the folks who are involved in national ocean policy. And that's going to be important, as are the champions in Congress who will be essential to helping protect these things as well. Now, what about most of the talk that we hear about the nominees are up at the cabinet level. We don't have any appointees down at the lower levels. We don't know who will be running agencies that matter for the oceans. And these people matter. These are things that we pay a lot of attention to. We were expecting a Clinton administration, and many of us would have been intimately involved on the transition team. People in this room probably would have been invited to take positions in the Clinton administration. That's not the way it is. In many cases, the environmental community, the ocean community is not deeply involved in the discussions that are going on. At best, we're collecting information. So there are a lot of names that are getting floated that we're aware of. I have to tell you, head of NOAA, these important positions, there's a range from surprisingly good to predictably frightening, but the surprisingly good are good. These are qualified, experienced, competent individuals who care about these issues. They may not agree philosophically on everything in the way that we do, but they often have experience and care about these issues. So even when we're looking at the people at the top, Tillerman, the Secretary of State, or Ross with Commerce. Commerce oversees oceans. It makes no sense. It absolutely doesn't, but that's where oceans are, under Commerce. First blush, you would think, well, this can't be good for the oceans. But as an aside, I was talking to a senator the other day, and they reminded me, it turns out several of these nominees are supportive of Law of the Sea. We've been trying to pass the Law of the Sea Treaty. The United States has never, the Senate has not, what's the word, Michael? Ratified. The Law of the Sea Treaty. It's entered into force internationally, enough countries have, but we've not ratified it in the United States. The thought that we might have people in a Trump administration to help get us over the hump because the Republicans in the Senate are blocking it is an interesting thought. I put these things out simply to let you realize that there sometimes can be unexpected consequences. And again, a good reason to not look at the potential worst of this. So, this is where we're coming from. The other piece I'd like to highlight is we've been here before. One of the reasons that I'm not maybe as nervous about this as I should be, we have been in a position where a president was elected who really didn't prioritize our issues with a Congress that didn't as well. 2004. Ocean Champion's first electoral cycle was 2004. And that's similar to what we're dealing with here. In that election, most people were talking about a generation of Republican control in the House. And if you'll recall, we had a swing that occurred in the House and the Senate right afterwards. So there are unexpected consequences that we're unaware of. We don't have perfect information. There are reasons for optimism. Now, more importantly, let's look at Congress. Been talking to a lot of our champions up there to try to get a sense of where they're going. Our approach, Senator Begich spoke to this a little bit, our approach to how we deal with these issues, we all know what the important issues are facing our oceans. There really hasn't been much debate on this for decades, whether we go back to a report I worked on when I was at the National Academy of Sciences in the 90s, all the way to the Pew Commission report or the U.S. Ocean Commission report, many of the exact same issues, and the solutions are pretty well known. The issue really is about political will and why Ocean Champions exists to get that political will that we need. But also we do the reverse engineering. So I spent a lot of time in the past couple of months talking to members about what is important to them, what they believe and what they see as the opportunities and the challenges. And so I thought it would be valuable, after talking with leaders such as Senator Whitehouse, Senator Schatz of Hawaii, Senator Cantwell of Washington, and others who will be leading not just on the issues, but in key committees, and this matters. These committees still will be doing their work. Senator Leahy, who is the new ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, I promise you, they will still spend a lot of money in Congress. If they do nothing else, they will still spend a lot of money. We can still influence that the money goes to the right programs. They will have influence on a lot of these things. So let me quickly just share, this isn't supposed, I can't cover them all. It'll pique your interest in areas, follow up with me afterwards. Obviously we can go into much more. But I want to share with you a few things that they raised of where there are opportunities. Plastics, plastic pollution, marine debris, both on the domestic level and the international level. This came up in multiple offices and often very much near the top. Corals, the coral reauthorization, obviously Hawaii and Florida. This is going to be an issue that they're going to look at. This would be modest. This isn't going to be something that can be complete and over the top, but it's also something that they're not going to completely shy away from. Fish, sustainable fisheries, a huge issue for us. Well, we're basically looking at a reauthorization. We have a great fish law in place. We have the Magnuson-Stevens Act that is working extremely well on many, many fronts. We've been nervous about opening it up because there is a little problem down in the Gulf of Mexico with one fishery, and it could really wreak havoc. Well, it looks like that problem may be solved in a different way. If that's the case, we may not have the fear of opening up the bigger bill. If the bigger bill gets opened up, believe it or not, we might even be able to strengthen it a little. If not, we can make sure we don't open it up. What are a couple of the other issues? That harmful algal blooms. This has been a priority issue for Ocean Champions. It's still coming up in many of the offices we talk about. Clinton campaign, for example, other than climate change, it was their top issue in Florida because last summer when they were campaigning in a swing state, there was a toxic algal bloom on both the Atlantic coast of Florida and the west coast of Florida that was devastating the state. So we're hearing from, and these blooms are occurring all over the country. So we're hearing from our champions who led and realized we passed a standalone harmful algal bloom bill that had bipartisan support 2 Congresses ago, and the same folks are coming back to us saying we can do more of this. So these issues and others are coming up. When I contact and talk to these champions, there's no shortage of issues. They're not saying we can't do anything. To Senator Begich's point, that's not what they're saying. They have a long list. It was incredible. They recognize it has to be modest change in many cases. We can't go get it all. But they're ready to go do the work. In some cases, we're going to see improvements on committees, and this matters. Senator Rubio was the chairman of the Ocean Committee on Oceans, the subcommittee on Oceans in the Commerce Committee. Senator Rubio was a little busy the past couple of years, losing a presidential election. He couldn't care less about the oceans. Well, now we're going to likely get Senator Sullivan from Alaska. We much would prefer Senator Begich from Alaska, but there are advantages to having an Alaska senator because they do, even the Republican senator from Alaska, who is not an ocean champion, but I tell you what, they do understand oceans and care about oceans in a different way. We'll get more hearings, more issues will come up, likely more things will move. This is what I'm hearing from members. This isn't, again, I'm not trying to push my agenda up here. I want to share with you the kind of encouraging things that I'm hearing from them. And again, I have to repeat, Senator Leahy, ranking member on the Appropriation Committee. Senator Leahy is an ocean champion, a very close friend of Ocean Champions. We are thrilled because I cannot repeat enough, if there is one thing that Congress will do well, and I will guarantee you this is from the most conservative Freedom Caucus member on, they will spend a lot of money. I don't care what any of them campaign on. They will spend a lot of money, and we work hard behind the scenes to make sure that the right programs are getting as much of that money as humanly possible. A lot of the things that I would be talking about tonight, it's a money play. So the Pacific Monument, Senator Schatz, for example, the pushback from opponents of monuments is you put them in place and then you don't do anything with them. You don't manage them, you don't enforce them. Senator Schatz is working to get money to do just that, not just for the Pacific. He wants to work to get money for the Atlantic as well. That's a money play that will do good things for conservation, of course, but it also starts to get at the heart of some of the arguments against why we do these things and how we do them. So let me end that piece of it there, just touch on one thing. Why no discussion of climate? Probably the biggest issue that the planet is facing. It's a good question. It's an important question. It's one that we struggle with a lot. But the answer is really pretty simple. Blue issues, ocean issues, the kinds of things that I've talked about here, water quality, coastal water quality, fisheries, plastic debris, wildlife issues. I didn't even bring up a lot of wildlife issues that remain in play. Those are what we know are ocean issues, that if we in this room do not continue to work those issues, they're not going to get done. We have to do those. And the champions who are ocean champions in Congress, they are who we depend on to make sure those things get done. They're not particularly partisan for the most part. They're not. It's one of the great benefits we have. People do not throw us out of offices or refuse to see us on almost any ocean issue. It's not seen as partisan. They're typically more regional, constituent service type of things. We have liberal Democrats who are terrible on some ocean issues, conservative Republicans who are great on some ocean issues. That's a benefit for us. As you all know, that is the antithesis of climate change. Climate change is ideological and partisan. We could debate forever whether it should be this way, why it happened, who's to blame, none of that matters. Equally importantly, there are strong, powerful forces that are there on climate. the green environmental community, I consider us the blue, the green, they're there. They have this fight. They are there, they're ready, they're going for it. From Ocean Champions' perspective, there's just not a unique key role that we can play that they're not taking care of. We know the impacts of climate, direct and indirect, on oceans, of course. And we can still work on some of these issues, the indirect. Acidification, storm impacts, sea level rise. Those are things we can still talk about. Republicans don't throw us out talking about acidification. We can do it. We can talk about a lot of, but not climate. That is something that we just have to be very, very careful on. It's not that we aren't supportive on the issue, et cetera, but it is something that we are a little careful on. Now, every one of our champions, minus, maybe one or two Republicans, all are strong champions on climate. I mean, it's how it plays out. But a couple of our Republicans probably aren't. But for the most part, even our Republicans are strong climate folks. But I did want to point that out, that we are not oblivious to the biggest threat facing our planet, and we work indirectly, as I say, on issues such as acidification, sea level rise, and those are things that, of course, are on the list. And many of our champions, so you know, this is how they approach it as well. Even, very strong climate champions do work on other issues with Republicans and agree to not bring up climate in the preamble of a bill, et cetera. So let me close it there. I know we've run a little bit late tonight. I have to, for those of you who know me and have seen me give talks, I have to end it with my take-home message of the phrase I love to use of elections matter. And it's important that I end it on this, that for those of us who care about our oceans, it is essential that we support and do what is necessary to reward the politicians who are helping us to ensure healthy and thriving oceans. In particular, getting them elected and reelected. And we hold those accountable who are doing things to destroy our oceans. In particular, we defeat them. Good ocean policy is essential to healthy and thriving oceans. And good ocean policy needs these champions in Congress. It is such a simple model. We didn't create it. I often flippantly say we're the NRA of the oceans. That's what we want to be. I wish we were the NRA for the oceans. But I think you know what I mean when I say that. That's what we need to be. That's what we have to be. That's what the oceans need for us to be effective. That's what coastal communities need. That's what people need. And that's what we're going to deliver with your help. So many of you in this room have helped make our successes possible, directly and indirectly. So many of you have been part of the successes on Capitol Hill that I've talked about. This is a collective effort. I hope you realize in what you're hearing tonight, there are unique ways that you guys can engage with us. You all don't need to do politics. We got it. We can do it. There are ways for charitable organizations and C3s to engage with us. And just to be clear, if there are any spies, the Maurice La Foundation does not fund Ocean Champions. And Earhart does. I want to be clear, seriously. I mean, but the key is we do indeed need the collective power. Grassroots communications, all the things that a lot of folks are doing, combined with the electoral political piece. Together, we'll do it. We're going to do it. So please leave with a little bit of optimism. We're going to beat this. We're going to do well. We're going to keep making progress. Thank you all for everything.